the very important issue that we're talking about, as you've been talking about this morning and listening to this morning, and we'll be talking about here at the Rockefeller Foundation tomorrow, is multilateral development bank reform and how we can speed resource allocation to the global south from the north in a very crucial time for climate and for the world. This is a very, very key issue for all of our discussions, as President Shah was just mentioning, for Paris, for the UAE and COP28, and it's one of the most important issues of 2023. The quantity and quality of climate finance needs to be improved, and it needs to be more available to finance the just transition, and how we leverage that finance is critical as well. These are some of the points that we'd like to talk through today. I would really love to kick off with Prime Minister Mottley on this issue. She, of course, is the author of the Bridgetown Initiative, along with Dr. Shah, as mentioned earlier, and the others that have contributed as well. But she has done a fabulous piece in Foreign Affairs this week, which I'm jealous of. That should have been foreign policy, but that's okay, Prime Minister. Along with Dr. Shah, focused on that initiative and what we need to do to highlight how the World Bank, IMF, international financial institutions need to change their approach to finance and move that finance from north to south. They are facing a crisis of trust as the climate threat intensifies. And I'd love for you to highlight a little bit for everyone the core principles of the Bridgetown Initiative. Of course, we all know those, but just a refresher for the room. And then perhaps we can go through a few of the tenets that you proposed in this piece in Foreign Affairs.
I hear you, but I also want to use the opportunity in the 40 minutes that's available to all of us not to repeat that which is known. So the Bridgetown Initiative is there, it's being modified, and for the record, I'm not the author, but it's a collection of all of us, a whole group of people coming together who have recognized that the institutions that we have today that were developed for reconstruction in the middle of the 20th century that have been modified along the journey are not fit for purpose today, full stop. And therefore, rather than looking back, the question is, how do we evolve from what we put out with the existing Bridgetown Initiative? We believe that we need to be more laser-like and ensure that there is not a rift placed between us and low-income countries, as is being attempted to maintain the status quo. Bottom line is that in the same way the World Bank evolved to deal with reconstruction and eventually elimination of poverty, it cannot be equal to today's time without dealing with global commons. And the global commons are much wider than just simply dealing with the state of poverty, but they threaten the state of prosperity to bring people back into poverty. And that is really the reason why we have to deal with the global commons. In addition to that, it threatens the very earth. And as I keep saying, we haven't found a way to live on Mars yet, so we need to get it right. Secondly, I am satisfied that there is movement being made, but the movement is not sufficiently fast or broad. And to that extent, therefore, I get worried when I hear that innovation in MDBs takes long, because regrettably my constituents don't have a long period to be able to endure this. The fact that Italy has announced a state of emergency to deal with migrants is indicative of the fact that we're only starting to scratch the surface. I, like Senator Kerry, believe that this next set of summers and winters are going to change everything, because quite frankly, the global population is not going to stand for the status quo when temperatures are rising way above anything that is humanly sustainable, and temperatures are falling to within the temperatures on Mars. We believe that debt sustainability cannot be kicked down the road or cannot be treated as an apostrophe to the conversation. The reality is that it is intended for us to look at 60% roll-off in normal times, but we're not in normal times. The word polycrisis was used in the last 15 minutes of the last panel at least 5 or 6 times. And therefore, if we don't recognize that there has to be a different approach, or as Sultan would say, course correction, then we're in trouble. This is not about climate alone. Climate is only one of the SDGs. And if we can save the planet and die from famine, or save the planet and die from bullets, it does not help us. And therefore, you cannot divorce climate from development finance. What is at stake is a trust deficit between the global north and the global south. And until we finally resolve it, we thought we were resolving it in 1945. We didn't. We kept the shadows of imperialism alive. And we have now to deal with it, because this technology has effectively disrupted everything, and it therefore places a spotlight on those who want to maintain a position of do as I say and not as I do. Why do I say so? Because everything that we've been told not to do was done recently in the polycrisis moment by the G7 countries, from quantitative easing to all kinds of export restrictions, etc. The world cannot be shaped by simply an old order. It has to be shaped by transparency, fairness, and a just transition in every sense of the word, which means understanding why there is not the attraction to be able to move capital to the south by the private sector, and that means deconstructing and allowing us to address the risk, real and perceived risk, one by one, and reconstructing a more perfect order. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you, Prime Minister. And we'll come back to some of the specifics of your recommendations, hopefully, in a moment. Dr. Sultan, I would love to bring you into the conversation as well. Thank you so much for joining us. You founded and chair Masdar, a renewable energy powerhouse in the UAE, but also head the 12th largest oil company in the world. That puts you in a very unique position to talk about transitions and understand how we make change. And specifically in your position leading COP28, this is a great attribute that we'd love to hear a little bit more about. How you expect to make Minister Maire, welcome. How you expect to be able to transition that flow, and how you are we're zeroing in on economics right now. What are the keys to increasing that flow from the north to the south in COP28? And let's talk about the run up to COP28 and then what we I'd hope at the end to achieve at COP28 in that vein.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. It is indeed a great pleasure to be here with such esteemed colleagues and such esteemed audience. This year is actually a very significant year in the global climate dialogues. COP28 is going to conduct the first global stocktake, and it's simply the first assessment or evaluation of what we have progressed against since the Paris Agreement. And to be very honest and direct, we really don't need to wait until we conduct the global stocktake in November this year. We already know that we are way off track. And if we're serious about keeping 1.5 alive and ensuring that the world progresses in a practical manner to help achieve the 1.5 and reduce emissions by 43% only in the next 7 years, we must come to terms with some realities. And those realities are simply, we must accept to course correct. And this course correction will have to address many gaps, bridge many gaps, and address many of roadblocks that we have come across over the past few years. Finance and capital is going to be a critical success factor. Ensuring that capital is available, capital is accessible, and capital is affordable is going to be what can help make the COP process back being the process that will deliver real and tangible results. Over the past few months, I have been conducting a listening engagement tour. I simply traveled the world. And I must say that it has been a very rich learning experience. Even though I have been participating in many of the COPs before, I've participated personally in 11 COPs, including the Paris, COP21 in Paris. I have come to terms with some facts. One, there is very high expectations coming out of the global stocktake at COP28 this year. Yet, it is met with very low trust. In fact, I have spent a lot of my time visiting and engaging with the Global South. And in order for us to correct course, we have to come to terms with some realities, and we have to come with a robust understanding of what it's going to take to put this back on the right track. And it's all centered around making finance and capital available. And if it is available, it needs to be accessible. And if it is accessible, it needs to be affordable. Earmarking funds in different organizations doesn't in any way cater for the solution. Ensuring that those funds are available, accessible, and affordable, and ensuring that we develop the necessary instruments and mechanisms for the Global South to be able to easily tap into those funds is going to be key in order for us to address such a global challenge. And as such, we've taken this responsibility on. Finance and capital is going to be a central theme across COP28, and that's why we're here participating in the spring meetings. I have been engaging with the IMF, with the World Bank. I have been vocal about our position towards the real need for a comprehensive, holistic reform of the MDBs and IFIs, while also we need to develop some catalytical instruments that will help advance and accelerate making such funds available to cater for the Global South. As far as COP28 is concerned, we will make sure that we provide the space and the environment for everyone to participate and to contribute to the overall success of COP. We're calling it the COP of action, the COP of impact, and a COP for all. We will make sure that we approach COP in a very inclusive manner. We will not leave anyone behind. We will engage with everyone, as we've been already in our listening engagement tour, and we'll make sure that we come up with a proper understanding of the gaps that can help materialize in a more of a Marshall Plan or more of a business plan with a clear set of KPIs catering for very ambitious goals and objectives when it comes to mitigation, adaptation, and as well as ensuring that the loss and damage fund becomes real and operational, and when it comes to climate finance, ensuring the proper and right comprehensive reforms are conducted across MDBs and IFIs, while also we contribute through different instruments, a catalyst that will help accelerate and fast track those developments. When it comes to the energy transition, we possess the 5th oil reserve and the 7th gas reserve in the world. In 2005, I led a fact-finding mission when our leadership in the United Arab Emirates took a bold decision to invest in renewable energy and sustainability. And many around the world used to receive me with one question: why would a major oil producing nation proactively seek a key role in the renewable energy space? That is my answer to energy transition. While some think that we shy away from energy transition, the fact of the matter is that we're running towards the energy transition. 2006, we launched a little company called Masdar, the Abu Dhabi Future Energy Company. Today, this company, Masdar, is the largest renewable energy investor in the world, with 25,000 megawatts of operational assets on its balance sheet, with a target of achieving 100 gigawatt by 2030. This is energy transition in practice. This is exactly what we have been doing over the past few years, and this is exactly what we will be doing over the next few years. But how did we do that? We did that simply because the political will is there, technology is actually available, and yes, we had to apply capital and scale to ensure that these technologies become more efficient and more cost effective, and that will continue to be the case, including hydrogen. And that is one of the themes that I will stay very much focused on. That is the need of tripling renewable energy capacity and doubling hydrogen. I know that hydrogen is still at its infancy, yet the same approach that was conducted to help advance renewable energy to where it is right now, I think the same approach should and could be applied on hydrogen.
Very good. COP28 of action. We very much look forward to that. Thank you for your comments. Deputy Secretary General, I'd love to come to you next. I saw you taking notes, but just quickly to frame, in remarks at the Oslo Energy Forum a few months ago, you pointed out that 733 million people globally live without access to electricity, and that achieving universal access to electricity for all by 2030 is going to require 100 million new power connections, a tremendous amount of work. Is it possible to focus on these two urgent outcomes simultaneously? Cutting emissions, achieving climate justice, and also what does that mean for the workers of the world who focus on providing that energy currently as it stands right now?
Well, thank you very much, and welcome opportunity to speak about the climate piece, but speak about it in the context of the SDGs. I think we have for long now not framed this discussion in an agenda that the placeholder for climate was kept until the Paris summit happened, and it is an integral part of the Sustainable Development Agenda. And so to fragment the discussion doesn't do justice for people or for the planet as it is. And this year there are two stock takes. There's a stock take for the SDGs, there's a stock take for climate. So it's double for climate, but it is overarchingly about sustainable development and how we finance that. And this is an important part of it. So the 700 million people that we speak about, that's the development agenda. And connecting them to power and to livelihood, to the life of dignity is also sustainable development. And I think that we can do all of this. To have this false dichotomy between one and the other is not helpful. Often I'm told which are the goals that are priority. They're not going to be achieved by 2030, so can we rehash them now? We can just do climate. Even in the evolution roadmap for the World Bank, there's a sudden focus on, well, do we redefine poverty? Which part of poverty do we take? And then we'll do climate. It is one and the same, and I think it's very important that we have this straight in every one of the discussions that we have, and how we bring about the financing. On the climate agenda, it's really, for us with the MDBs, I think framing this around outcomes in the SDGs is important. That's the just piece about it, on the jobs, connecting to food systems, the transition on energy that Sultan speaks to. These are all very much a part of what we need to understand in terms of policy, in the bank, in countries, in trying to connect us to a pipeline that we can invest in. Is that happening? Sadly not. We will find that as we said, we're all off track. But where is the leadership going to come to make this a difference? I don't think in this room anyone does not know what needs to happen. We've said it for the last 7 years. So we're not for want of knowing what to do. But the leadership needs to get behind us to make the changes. When we talk about reform, it's too little. It's hard. It's a transformation. If you woke up today, 75 years after the Bretton Woods were created, saw the crises that we are seeing in the south of our world, would you create the same institutions? No, you wouldn't. And so what would we do in the short term with the institutions we have, and we can do quite a bit, but it's not just the bank or the MDBs, it's the shareholders. Leadership also needs to come from the shareholders to take the decisions that they need to take to put the money where it's needed. We know that the resources are there. COVID proved that there was a response that got us a vaccine, a science response, incredible. But was it accessible to everyone? No. The impacts of COVID were not just health and the climate, but they were also socioeconomic. We still haven't seen what resources that were required through the existing institutions to do something about that. Sadly, no one expected that we would have a war in Europe in 2022. And we had to grapple with the epicenter of that, but it had aftershocks. And those aftershocks are still not yet tended to in the rest of the world. And when you come around a table or a discussion like this, the trust deficit that we are seeing widening is causing a fragmentation. It's causing an absence of many from the conversation because they are fast losing belief in the institutions that we created for humanity and that we've created to try to do something about keeping 1.5 alive. So I think in all of these discussions, less about the substance, because I think there's incredibly good work that's been done, but much more about the political will and the leadership that is needed to get this right. Now, much of that leadership is around this table. It is also in Washington. This is a good momentum to keep. We will have new leadership that comes into the bank. We need to put right front and center that the pain in one part of the world is not a different pain from the rest, and it needs to be equally addressed. And it needs to be done in a way in which there is scale, there's a sense of urgency, and a sense of justice.
Outstanding. I told you this was a rock star panel. Thank you very much, Deputy Secretary General. Secretary Kerry, I would love to turn to you now and talk through some of the reforms that we're talking about and the importance of the moment, the political will, as we just heard from the Deputy Secretary General. I think you're on. Yep. And talk through that a little bit, and also some of the mechanisms that we're using. And in fact, there's been some developments just in the past few days of some of the new programs that are underway, such as the Energy Transition Accelerator partnership that you're working on. Would love to hear your thoughts on this, sir.
Well, thank you very much. I'm privileged to join this panel of friends and cohorts in this battle to try to build the capacity to respond with common sense and with the speed that we need to a crisis that is obviously proving itself hard to adequately describe to people in a way that actually motivates them. And the anger that my colleagues here, particularly Mottley, has described is going to grow if we don't respond. Everything that we have worked on since World War II, with Bretton Woods, with the UN, with the international global principles, with efforts to try to build sustainability into nation states, is at risk. And if you think Europe was significantly changed in its politics because of the influx of refugees coming from Syria and Turkey during the war, and flooding Europe, and you saw profound changes and challenges to democracy as a result. Whole new parties came up to profit from the anxieties that came with influx of people from other countries. You've seen nothing compared to what is going to happen if we do not respond more rapidly to the crisis of climate. And obviously the World Bank and other banking institutions and all financial institutions are critical to our ability to be able to do that. But let me just underscore this for people for a moment. I'm not going to go into a science lesson, but I am going to try and give you a moment of the current picture. This past summer, on 3 continents simultaneously, first time in human history this has happened, there were record high levels of temperature. In the Arctic, it was 70 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. In the Antarctic, it was 100 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. A well-known scientist who's part of the IPCC and runs the Potsdam Institute in Berlin, Johann Rockström, says to me, he's afraid that we may have passed, but we are certainly at about 5 tipping points. Irreversibility, folks, on tipping points. 1, the coral reefs. 2, the Barents Sea. 3, permafrost, which is releasing unprecedented amounts of methane, which is 20 to 80 times more damaging than CO2. And then the most fearsome of all, Arctic and Antarctic. That's where we are. And you see the intensity of the storms increasing. Why? Because there's more moisture in the air, goes up into the atmosphere, falls as rain, ergo flooding, and the problem of 90% of the heat that comes to Earth now goes into the ocean. And the ocean is irrevocably changing. So life itself is at risk. We get 51% of the oxygen we breathe comes from the ocean. But there are 500 different dead spots in the ocean now where there isn't oxygen, so nothing lives. That's what we're playing with here, folks. And we obviously need to change our response level. For something that is existential, and I've heard every public figure talk about how we face an existential challenge, we are not behaving as if it is existential. And in my travels around the world, as I try to negotiate with countries to not perhaps grow the old mistakes as the basis of their energy system and be new, their first question to me, whether it's Macky Sall in Senegal, or it was Buhari in Nigeria, or Tshisekedi in DRC, well, okay, I'm willing to try that. We don't want to build the bad, but can you help us with money? Do you have the ability to able to make us develop in a way that is clean? And I sheepishly have to wilt out of the room, knowing that certainly with this Congress, we're not going to produce that money, but we're not anyway. Look around you. We know from every analysis, Nick Stern understands this as well as anybody here, that in order to do what we need to do, we need to be investing, not spending, investing $4.5 trillion a year for the next 30 years. At the World Economic Forum this past year, I was asked, well, what do you think is the biggest challenge in order to be able to get this done? I said, money, 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 money. Now, money doesn't solve everything. You still need political will, you still need structure, you still need change. But if we can't invest, if we can't deploy the technologies we have, we can't meet the goals we set. And that is going to create unbelievable anger, folks, and it should. The global south is operating under almost a completely different system of day-to-day business and life. Why? Because it's 700% or 600% more costly in the global south to be able to borrow where they're already swimming under debt, and along comes a storm, and they're told, well, we don't have money, or we're not going to provide money there because your debt service is too high and so forth, so they don't get money. It's a round robin. And people are losing faith in the larger global structure that we have created in order to, ostensibly to cope with these problems, folks. Now, the tragedy of all this is not a doom story. We can still win this battle. We're behind, and we're on a track to hit about 2.5 degrees, upwards of 3 or so, but think of where we were in Paris. We were heading to 3.7 degrees, 4 degrees. And now we have moved significantly, and we are capable of moving even faster. You saw the announcement today about vehicles in the United States. Electric vehicles are penetrating now at about 15% in the US. We can hit 100% by 2035, 50% by 2030. We're seeing amazing changes in heat pumps being bought. And some industry folks in alternative provision of industry were telling them, don't buy a heat pump, it's not going to work. Well, guess what? It's up about 20% in Maine, where it gets really cold, and they know it works. In Poland, purchases are up 117%, and it works. So there are all kinds of technologies we could be deploying far more rapidly, but we need the financial system of the world to join us in recognizing the existentiality of what we are facing as choices here. And if we can put that money on the table, folks, which we ought to be able to, just very quick, and in the global south, there's too much talk of risk, we got to de-risk. In many cases, that risk is greatly exaggerated, by the way. In many cases, there is a capacity because there's a revenue stream to the projects that are available. So whether it's an energy project or a transportation project or water project, there's revenue to be had. You can go to the marketplace under those circumstances, and we don't do it. And the World Bank, we're here ourselves to sort of organize ourselves around the World Bank, has to become a greater instrument of organizing all the MDBs, of pushing the financial structure of the world, of making greater lending available, of even engaging in debt swaps for the ability of people to undertake these efforts. Believe me, the leaders of those countries are ready to do that. We, the collective developed world, need to put our act together and make this capital available, bring a marriage of the financial institutions of the world into money-making propositions, create more bankable projects, and accelerate this effort. If we do that, the marketplace, I believe, will do the rest. And just last addendum, this guy to my left, I've worked with him the last couple of years. I've seen what the UAE is committed to. I believe that with the proper effort and all of us coming together, we can make this COP a unique success, not in spite of the fact they're an oil and gas company, but because they have an ability to pull others to the table. The proof will be in the pudding, but my bet is on their commitment to getting that done.
Thank you, Secretary Kerry, for that political momentum that you just exemplified. And I see Minister Maire nodding through all of this, and we'd love to get into some practicalities as well. So just not to get into too technical, but a couple of different points. France has, of course, advocated very strongly, I believe, for the G20 to raise new SDR contributions in the IMF from 20% to 30%. That's into the Resilience and Sustainability Trust and the Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust. And you are standing by that with France's contributions. Is the rest of the G20 following suit?
No, unfortunately. So we're waiting for the G20 countries to do the same as we did on the SDRs and on the IMF resources. But first of all, I would like to say that John perfectly described what is at stake. What is at stake is life on Earth. And what is at risk is life on Earth. This is the long-term challenge for all of us. And the immediate challenge for all of us, especially for European countries, could be political unrest, political instability, and the risk of having flows of refugees and illegal migrations, posing really great difficulties for all European countries. So we need to be aware of what is really at stake behind the question of climate, life on Earth. And I really fully share what John said on this question. Second, we want COP28 to be a success. We want this COP of action to be a success for all of us. But for this, we need, I think, to meet three challenges. The first one is a stronger cooperation between nations, between institutions, between NGOs, between banks, between multilateral development banks. We cannot have each body having its own project without having a global approach. If there is good projects in some parts of the world, we need to gather the efforts and to have a stronger cooperation between all those international bodies, all those international and multilateral banks. Let's avoid this kind of flag effect where everybody wants to have its own project by itself instead of having a stronger cooperation which would be far more efficient for all of us. Cooperation is the first key word. The second one is private funding. We need money. But let's be very clear. I'm the French finance minister. I'm short on money. And I have the obligation to come back to sound public finances due to the European rules. And I cannot explain to the French people that I don't have money anymore for schools, for universities, or for hospitals, but I still have some money for developing countries. This becomes more and more difficult to explain. So subsidies is part of the response. We did our job with the SDRs, and we are asking the other G20 members to exactly do the same. But we cannot rely only on subsidies. It would be a lie. It would be a lie to developing countries. Because all the finance ministers of the OECD countries, of the European countries, would say exactly the same. After the COVID crisis, after the inflation crisis, we need to come back to some public finances, so we cannot rely only on public subsidies. We need to better use the capital of multilateral banks. We need to put in place a new financial system as proposed by Janet Yellen and as proposed by John Kerry. This is the right solution, to have a new financial system where we could get a better use of the capital of multilateral banks to have a leverage on private funding. This is the key. And this should be absolutely at the core of COP28. The third challenge, of course, is to put deadlines. If we really want to meet the challenge of climate, we need to put clear deadlines for the public opinion and for the member states of the COP28. Our proposal is to have a very clear deadline on the phasing out of coal, 2030 for all OECD countries without any exception, and 2040 for the other countries. So these are the three proposals that we are putting on the table as far as COP is concerned. Stronger cooperation, new funding and a new financial system as proposed by the United States of America, by John, and of course a clear deadline on the phasing out of coal.
Thank you, Minister. Prime Minister, back to you. The RSTs that have just been funded, and I believe that Barbados was one of the early recipients of that funding. Could you tell us a little bit about that? Is that meaningful? Is that a step in the right direction? It's just a few countries who have been recipients. We have just been discussing, Secretary Kerry said it's not too little too late, we have to start now. Are we heading in the right direction here?
Absolutely. The RST has made a difference, but it has not gone far enough. And it hasn't gone far enough not because of the lack of ambition of Kristalina, but largely because others have not followed France to be able to put their money where their mouth is. The reality is, and you heard Amina make the point, there's a lack of political will. And you cannot link vulnerability to quotas, which is what the IMF has been forced to do because of the limited amount of money that's been made available to fund the RST. We can keep talking around in circles. You know, I don't know what it is to lead a large country, but I know what it is to lead a country. And I know that things happen when you want them to happen. So, excuse me, bottom line is that we need people to step up to the plate. And John, I wish now that I could carry that speech everywhere that you just gave. Because if that is how the G7 countries feel, then they need to act.
Fantastic. Dr. Sultan, it would be great just to hear from you final. How do we take action? How do we turn what we've just heard and what we've talked about into action so that we can move forward?
First, we need to accept that we need to be united in our approach. That's why I've been promoting COP to be a COP of solidarity. In order for us to keep such ambitions, and in order for us to deliver against the already set aggressive and ambitious targets, we can no longer allow for polarization to take place as part of this process. There are enough platforms out there where polarization can take shape or form. When it comes to climate, time has come for us to accept that societies and economies can no longer entertain such polarization. Unity and solidarity is going to be key in ensuring the success of COP28. And like John mentioned earlier, I can comfortably say that since we started our engagement, we have experienced real positive traction from all parties that are willing to step up and up their game, whether they're governments, public stakeholders, private stakeholders, industries, oil and gas, heavy emitting industries. Everyone is ready to engage and up their game, given that there are clear targets, clear ways of measuring their performance against those targets, and ensuring that the private sector has a role to play. And in order for us to do that, we need to help lower the risks for private capital to engage, and in particular in the Global South. And that is a mandate that I am, as the co-president, with the help and support of everyone involved, is very much emphasizing throughout my engagement.
Well, I want to echo Secretary Kerry in feeling that your ambition and your record certainly demonstrates that you are the right person to lead us down that path. There's been a tremendous amount of very clear, clever, and thoughtful comments that we've heard on this panel discussion today, from the importance and the dire situation that we're in right now. Secretary Kerry, thank you for bringing that home, to the practicalities of finance and a G7 nation and how you balance the politics there, but the impassioned pleas that from the Prime Minister of Barbados that these are just decisions that need to be made, and very much agree with that. And Deputy Secretary General to understand that this all syncs up with the SDGs. It is not separate. It is not independent. We have to think of them together and balance those. And I want to thank you all for participating and for enlightening us today. This has really been a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much.